Hi everyone, my name is Brad Lusk and I'm a Science and Technology Policy Fellow with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS. I'm also a co-organizer for the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics, or STEAM Team. The STEAM Team is a group of fellows that's interested in encouraging the general population, groups traditionally underrepresented in STEAM, and STEAM professionals to collaborate in the narrative and process of science. The STEAM team does this through three primary pillars of engagement: K through 12 and post-secondary training and outreach, working with communities traditionally underrepresented in STEAM in order to promote diversity and inclusion in STEAM, and finally, promoting good science communication to encourage knowledge and understanding of science. In this video, STEAM team member Chris Sundrick leads a roundtable discussion with Joe Palca, science communicator and correspondent at National Public Radio, or as many of you may know it as, NPR. In this presentation, Joe talks about his experience as a AAAS Mass Communication Fellow and how it shaped his career. He also shares some of his perspectives on the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine and how to communicate science in times of unprecedented uncertainty. Please note that the opinions expressed in this video are solely those of the individuals expressing them, and in no way reflect the views of the AAAS or NPR. And finally, the STEAM team will be hosting similar interviews in the coming weeks. So if you like this video, click the like button, and if you look forward to seeing similar videos, follow us on YouTube because we'll be posting them soon. Thank you, and enjoy Joe Palca.
Thanks, Brad. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Chris Sundrick. I'm a first-year fellow at the NIH, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest, NPR science correspondent Joe Palca. Since earning his PhD in psychology from UC Santa Cruz, Joe has been reporting with NPR since 1992. And recently, you may have heard his voice a lot on NPR radio because he's been reporting extensively on the development and the rollout of coronavirus vaccines. He's also the creator of the eponymous series Joe's Big Idea, where he examines the origins of scientific breakthroughs and the motivations of the scientists behind them. And he's the founder of NPR SciCommers, a collective of freelance science writers who help each other pitch and develop stories for publication. And with that, allow me to welcome Joe Palca. Welcome, Joe.
Howdy.
So, Joe, one thing that everyone here has in common is that we were all once PhD students. And another thing that we might have in common is that we all know how winding and torturous getting out of pursuing a career outside of academia is. Most of us here are exploring science policy in one way or another. So I want to start by asking you about your own career trajectory and how you went from grad school to a career in science journalism.
Yeah, well, it was also a AAAS thing, actually. I mean, the what is it? I get to write the origin story, so this is what I've written. I was sitting in my lab at UC Santa Cruz. I had a lab. Everybody wondered, say, how do you get any work done at Santa Cruz? So beautiful. Well, I worked in the basement of a building, and that's how you manage it, I guess. But I was sitting, it was a sleep lab, and I spent a lot of hours in that building all night. And in fact, my best friend from graduate school was the janitor who cleaned the building that I was working in. But I was looking at my copy of Science magazine, and there was a picture of these, it was, notes from AAAS, and it was all these people, young like me then, standing in front of a white marble building in Washington, D.C., and it said, Mass Media Science and Engineering Fellows Program. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I wonder what that would be like. And because I was at 4 years into my graduate degree, and I was all ABD, and I really my heart wasn't in the research. I was in a very easy graduate program, by which I mean, I was the only person doing what I was doing, and my advisor didn't like to come into the lab, and so I just did my thing. And And, he didn't throw up a lot of hurdles, and I didn't get a lot of challenges. And I don't know, if I'd gone to a different graduate school, it might have been different, but that's where I was, and I wasn't excited, and I wasn't really interested in going on, but I didn't have any other ideas. But I thought this fellowship might be fun, so I applied for it and I got it. And I don't know, there was this old story about anyway, the story is I found my calling. I went into this place where it was just learn something new every day. And instead of, holding the door open for people were holding the door open for me, because I was walking with a camera crew and they wanted to be on TV. So I really, really, really just, I came back saying, got it, this is what I got to do. And, but I finished my dissertation, which I always wonder, why did I do that? That it had absolutely no bearing on my career, or I don't think it really did, but it was sort of like, I got to finish this. So I finished it. And then I had no experience. It was 10 weeks as basically an intern, but I was relentless and bothered people and hectored people and worried people and warned them that if they didn't find me something to do, I'd continue to bother them. And so finally, somebody gave me a chance to try something, and that led to another thing, and that led to another thing. And so it was sort of kicking around television, which is where I started for about 4 years, from 1982 to 1985, the end of 1985. And then one of the strangest changes of course that ever could happen was I was sitting at my desk at Channel 9, which is the CBS station here in Washington, and the phone rang, and it was the editor of Nature. And he said, would you like to come work for us in Washington? And that's my advice, is if you want to go work for Nature, just wait till the phone rings. It's not really, anything I did on purpose, but it does relate to the AAAS program, because it really changed my life. And so when I came to Washington to work, I was an intern here in Washington too. And so when I came back to Washington for this job, I told the people in the AAAS office, hey, anytime. And they said, oh, we need somebody to talk to donors, or we need somebody to judge next year's fellows. So I was always there. And what happened was the editor of Nature called that office and said, hey, do you know anybody in Washington who needs a job? And they said, well, Joe's here. And so he decided, I guess maybe that's why my PhD helped, because, I don't think he would have just picked somebody off of local news with only that credential. But anyway, strangely enough, he hired me. And that's really when I think my science writing career began, in 1986. But since 1986, I've had 3 jobs. Job number 1 was Nature. Then 3.5 years later, I got traded to Science for a future draft pick. And then 3.5 years after that, I went to NPR. And I've been in the same dead-end job for 28 years. That's it. But the actual change was, this is what I got to do. And I think graduate school, absolutely nothing about graduate school helped me become a better journalist. Nothing. But it did teach me how to solve problems. And so I had a beginning state and I had an end state. Beginning state was, I didn't work in journalism. End state was, I did work in journalism. And so I just worried the problem. I attacked it from every direction I could think of, and I was successful. Now, okay, there's probably people have a similar story, and they can say, and I never got anywhere. And it's luck of the draw, it's timing, it's ability, it's all sorts of things. I don't think I've been getting jobs because I'm a charity case, and I'm a privileged white male, so that was in my favor. What can I say? It worked out. So that's how it happened.
Joe, I'm curious to know what kind of escape velocity you need to achieve in order to work somewhere like CBS or NPR. How many pieces do you think you had published by that point?
Well, CBS, none. I basically, my strategy was to do anything and to get in the door. And the best story of all was I was actually living in San Francisco when I got the fellowship. I was at Santa Cruz, and then I got sent to Washington as an intern or a fellow, and then I came back to San Francisco, and I said, "What's the beginning entry-level job in television for, someone with no experience?" And they said, "Well, there's the vacation relief writer." And so I said, "How do you get that job?" And they said, "Well, you have to take the writing test." And okay, so I called people up, and they said, "No, you don't have any experience. You can't take the writing test." But what I did for the summer was I took the newspaper, and I recorded the news from the TV, and I studied the style that they were using, and then I took pieces of newspaper articles and rewrote them in the format of the local news kind of thing. And finally, I met somebody at one of these gatherings, not unlike this, who said, "Oh, they'll give the writing test to anybody." So I wound up at ABC to take the writing test on a Thursday. And the writing test was essentially, here's some wire copy, write some news things. And so I did. I've been practicing it. And so I took the test on Thursday, and on Friday they said, "Could you come in Monday?" And Monday I'm writing the 5 o'clock news for the #1 program in the 5th largest market in the country. And so there's that moment of, imposter syndrome. Yeah, I think so. But don't tell anyone and just bull ahead. And so I don't know about escape velocity. I mean, I'd written a handful of magazine articles, but, nothing on like a daily news basis, and nothing in the level of science policy that I was writing for Nature, nothing. But, somebody, in this case, John Maddox, had the stupidity, foresight, whatever it was, he took a chance on me, and it was, then I suddenly was, "Oh, Joe can do this. Why don't we take him to science?" I don't know. But there was no, the process is, it's a little bit like, I like to say, it's a little bit like driving a car, If you don't kill anybody in the first 6 months because you're so inept, you probably will be able to drive for the rest of your life, and you still might have an accident, but when you start out with these jobs, you're just not as good as you are going to be. But if you're good enough, then they don't fire you after the first 6 months or the first 3 months.
I'd like to change gears a bit to the development of the coronavirus vaccines. So at about 11 months, the Pfizer vaccine now has the fastest development time of any vaccine in history. But still, the last administration felt that development was still too slow, and even went so far as to accuse the CEO of Pfizer of intentionally delaying the development of the vaccine in order to harm the last president's chances of re-election. They were also critical of the regulatory approval process and thought that was too slow as well. In your experience, was there even a kernel of truth to any of these accusations?
Oh yeah, they were actually slowing things down. No, that's not true. The God's honest truth is I have no idea if it's true or not, but everything in my experience tells me it's not. I never talked to Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, to ask him whether that was in his mind. He repeatedly said that wasn't what he wanted to do. I talked to the chief scientist in their vaccine division, and he seemed like an honest guy. I talked to other people that, they're saying, it goes back to that thing we were talking about, with food additives. We don't want to unleash a vaccine on people until A, we know it works, and B, we know it doesn't kill them. And the, I mean, if there was any indication that this administration was ready to do things that were half-baked, it was the whole experience with hydroxychloroquine. Because, yeah, let's do it. It works. I mean, my cousin got better, you know. I took it and I felt fine. I danced out of the hospital. What? You know, I mean, it just doesn't work for people who are used to the scientific method. Now, it could have been correct. I mean, hydroxychloroquine, I heard from a guy at the University of Minnesota who decided he had an idea for testing it. I really liked it. It was just, okay, anybody who's in a high risk situation, we're going to send them hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic. Because if it works at all, it's going to work before people get infected or prevent them from getting infected. It didn't work. I mean, it didn't work because the same number of people, they gave a placebo and a pill, and it was the equal numbers of sickness in both groups. So, you know, okay, it wasn't the best controlled study in the world, but it was a quick and dirty way of asking a question. And he did it with the best approximation of the scientific method. So, you know, I listened to Peter Marks from FDA saying, I'll quit before I approve a vaccine that, you know, hasn't passed muster. But I've worked around NIH and government agencies enough to know that there is a ton of politics. And decisions get made for strictly political reasons. So I'm not a baby about that. But I just don't think that, these guys, if there were slow walking, as I pointed out, the president was accusing them of slow walking the vaccine and hurting his chances of remaining president. But obviously it didn't work because he thinks he still won the election.
So, as I'm sure everybody in this room can agree with, we all know that even simple cotton masks, if enough people wear them, can help reduce the spread of the coronavirus. This is the consensus of epidemiologists and health experts, and polling shows that most Americans agree that mask mandates should be adopted in order to reduce the spread of the virus. But still, since the pandemic started, we've seen mask wearing become something of a culture war issue. We've also seen in years past, in recent years, that there's a increasingly growing hesitancy to vaccinations in general. There was a measles outbreak in New York City last year, or the year before the pandemic began. My question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge to reaching herd immunity, which Anthony Fauci now says may be as high as 90%? And do you think that there will be enough people who refuse to get the vaccine to significantly delay the end of the pandemic?
Again, the question of why there's vaccine hesitancy is opaque to me. I mean, I guess I do understand it when it comes to small children and exposing them to any risk whatsoever. So I understand from watching what happened in the dynamics of my own family, the concern that people have when it's like, we're going to give this to your child. Well, how well tested is it? Is it really safe? You know, there's a strong reaction to protect. But I also think that it comes from people. Well, it comes from human nature partly. But I don't get it. You know, I mean, I have friends who hate GMOs. Why do they hate GMOs? Well, because they're dangerous. Well, you know, you drill down and they say, well, okay, maybe they're not safe for you, but they're not good for the planet. Okay, once we get closer to that argument, I'm willing to discuss, should we be throwing away wild type plants in favor of genetically modified ones, and what are the consequences of that? I get it. There's an argument there. But risk is a hard thing for people to grasp, and certainly it's even harder for them to act on that knowledge. And I just don't think, I mean, economists have figured this out. I think Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize. He's really a psychologist because he just figured people, it's just not rational. And my favorite anecdote, and people can't even wrap their heads around this, but I'll tell you what it is, and you can think about it. But the chances of winning the lottery are the same whether you buy a ticket or not. And that doesn't sound possible, but it's so close to zero that you would never make that bet. It's some statistical chance. I heard in the Powerball this week where somebody won $1 billion, and we said on NPR, so I know it's right, that the chance of winning was 1 in 300 million. 300 million to 1 odds, and you would take that? Well, you know, you might as well just throw your money down the drain, or look to see if you can find a lottery ticket on the ground, because, you know. So I just don't think that people are programmed to understand risk, but they do understand when their cousin's sister's friend died after taking the vaccine. And what they don't even understand is how many people died on the way to the vaccination point in a car accident. I mean, you can carve this up in any old way you like, but no, I don't know. I mean, why people are hesitant, I have no idea. Whether or not it's going to affect the reaching herd immunity, that's a modeling question, and I just haven't seen what the numbers say about that. But I'm sure it's got to have some. Can't speed it up. But maybe the availability of vaccine is such that we're not even close to being able to answer the question how many people won't take it, because we can't yet give it to all the people who will take it.
So everyone here in this group is here because they're interested in science communication and public engagement. Do you have any advice for us about what we can do to reach out to target communities and improve confidence in the coronavirus vaccines? Are there any skills that you've honed over time that we can adopt?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence that my honed skills have made anything better. But on the assumption that I do believe that the way forward is not going to be people like me talking to large groups of people. I think it's going to be people like you talking to smaller groups of people. And my sincere belief, and this is part of the reason we founded the SciCommers, is that I do think we have to play small ball to solve this problem. And by that I mean we need to have communities, not reaching out to communities that don't know or trust you, but reaching out to communities that have a reason to know and trust you, and giving them accurate information and becoming a trusted messenger, as opposed to me just trying to tell people, oh, this is what you should do, or this is what science says. And I think the other thing, and I'm not sure that this is correct even, but I hope it is that it's, in terms of communication, it's important to listen. Because a lot of people, a lot of scientists especially, they want to tell you with great detail why they're right. And it's best to understand where people are and try to bring them along on the journey of getting them to right, or having them get to right on their own, rather than you trying to tell them what it is. It's just not a shortcut that works, I don't think. I mean, again, I don't study this. So my knowledge of this is anecdotal, and you wouldn't pay any attention to somebody whose knowledge of their topic was strictly anecdotal, but mine is. So what can I tell you? I'm a good communicator because I have a paycheck every week. or every other week, you know? But that could change if people decide that I'm not a good communicator, because I got no evidence to prove that I am except that paycheck. Oh, and I get prizes from people like me who think that what I'm doing is right, but they're doing what I'm doing. We don't know if they know what they're talking about either.
All right, well, thanks, Joe. Well, far be it for me to suck all of the oxygen out of the room. I think we're going to open it up to the floor for audience questions. Folks, if you have a question, just indicate so in the chat, and we'll invite you to unmute yourself and show your face and ask Joe directly. If you're too shy, then type out your question and we'll ask it for you. And we'll do our best to go in order. All right, so let's start.
An interpretive dance.
It really requires some choreography. So let's start with Vince. I see Vince has a question. Would you unmute yourself?
Hi, Vince. Are you walking?
Yes, I'm walking and I'm in Chicago. Thank you so much for the talk. My question was, a lot of us are working in federal agencies and want to contribute to some science journalism. Do you have any advice for people who are current fellows and who want to contribute to a story?
You mean continue to explore science journalism, or continue to explore communication skills, or?
So like contributing to like an active story, right? So, if you were to reach out to me on comment or something, or I had some expertise that I could contribute to a story.
Okay. It's all about building relationships. For me, I have to, I look at a paper and I call people up because I look at the references and I see who else they've cited that they base their paper on. And then I go back to those people and I say, well, what do you think? You can always get someone to disagree with the author of a paper, because somewhere in the paper it says, so-and-so used to foolishly think that, blah, blah, blah. So you go back to so-and-so and then they'll tell you that the person who thought they were foolish is actually foolish themselves. That's the blind way of doing it. But if I have a trusted contact, I'll go to that person. Now, how do I know how to find you? Well, when you get into the big leagues, they hire, PR firms to pitch me, and I wound up calling somebody today because they had somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who had something interesting to say. But usually that doesn't work. So my suggestion is that in general, if you have a ability to reach out to the person that you think you could help, do it. Because at the bottom of a lot of news articles now, they say, here's my email, or here's my Twitter handle, or here's something. So it's always helpful to say, hey, I might know something that could help you the next time. It's not going to be that day, but you can seed the future. So that's a way of doing it. But the other thing I wanted to say before I forget, the other thing about communicating is you have to practice. I mean, you have to do it. You have to, if it's something about, if you want to speak in public and get better at it, you have to speak in public. If you want to write and convince people or write clearly, you have to write. You can't think about it. You have to do it. So, I mean, you want to reach out to people, figure out who you want to reach out to, and then try to reach out to them. And, and I keep telling this to people, look, now you know me, right? You have somebody in the industry, and you can write to me and say, do you know anybody in Chicago who is covering X? And I might. Chances are I won't, but I'm a good starting point and I'm offering. So anybody who makes an offer like that, that's golden. Take them up on it. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Just put the number down and wait for the moment to come.
Well, thanks, Joe. Very generous. Let's go to Matthew next. Matthew says that he did the Mass Media Fellowship before doing the Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. So really rounding all of the AAAS bases here. Matthew?
He can't unmute. I can see, there he is.
Thank you. Yeah. Joe, it's so great to meet you tonight. I'm actually, essentially, because of the pandemic, we're now doing a mentorship program where we're still trying to do our own science writing. because we couldn't travel last year. And I realized I really do like both this kind of like fact-finding thing of science journalism, but I also like this kind of very practical translating concept I'm doing right now in my congressional office. And I was curious on maybe like ways to combine that. And I suppose one way might be like more investigative journalism, trying to find out why things go wrong. But I was curious if you knew of other people who maybe combine policy into their own kind of science writing beat.
Huh. Nobody is coming to mind. I mean, the guys, so Jeffrey Mervis is my go-to guy for science policy writing at Science Magazine. He's been doing it forever, and he really knows the ins and outs, but he's completely on the journalism side. I mean, he's not a policy person. So I'm trying to think of a policy person who more dabbles in the journalism side, and nobody's popping into my brain at the moment. But I think the problem you have when you're sitting in a congressional office is that anything that you write is going to be tinged with, you're writing it from that political office point of view. It's going to be hard to separate yourself because of the polarization in the world. You do an investigative journalism piece on housing, and somebody's going to say, oh, you're only doing that because your boss wants to improve public housing or get rid of public housing or whatever it is. So you've got that problem. It's not a neutral platform, but then journalism outlets are stopping being neutral too. But I can't think of anybody to point you to offhand. I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, Francis Collins does some writing, but it's written for him. Some of it he writes. He's a policy person. I have to think about it. I'm not sure I can answer the question, but yeah, be interesting to think about how to do it.
All right, let's go to Andrea Stathopoulos next.
Thanks. Joe, it's great to have you here. My question is, again, sort of asking for some advice, but if we're good enough at writing and we know a little bit of science, like what else is in that secret sauce that makes you successful in building a career as a science writer?
I don't know. I mean, I really, I mean, I don't think there's a formula. I do think persistence. I mean, I was all in. And again, maybe that was a luxury that, I didn't have to worry about. I had enough. I never thought about the time when I would spend down to zero because I hadn't made my career connect. And that part of my privilege growing up has become more and more aware to me. I've become more aware of that. I mean, I was totally lucky. At the same time, I did find a job in a reasonably short period of time, or I did find work pretty quickly. So I never had I not, I would have been in trouble, but I didn't, and I wouldn't have been in trouble anyway. If I'm not being clear, the only secret sauce is to be a little bit obsessed about it, I think, and to do it. And when other people are tired and go home, you're still doing it. Because when I went into nature, I feel like every job I've had, well, leaving local television aside, which was, it's too goofy to even describe. But starting with nature, I worked most weeks 7 days a week, and I loved it. And I went to Science Magazine, and I felt like, oh my God, this is so easy. I had an office. And then I went to NPR, and I thought, you mean I only have to fill 3 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever? I used to have to fill, the whole section. So it feels like it kept getting easier. Now, NPR, you sometimes wind up staying up all night, but not that often. I'm at a loss.
Honestly, that's reassuring because it means maybe I can just make it through the way you did.
Sure. I mean, anybody. I mean, I look. I look at resumes today, and I'm horrified because my resume or my transcript never would have cut it today. So I mean, I feel terrible for people who are. If I were, I mean, I always feel if I were up against this crowd of people, your age, closer to your age, I'd be in deep trouble. But then I also have something inside me, and I think this is important. And I mean, that's, believe in yourself. I don't know. There was something inside me that said I'm here to do something special, something. And maybe I'm kidding myself, but I just felt that I would eventually succeed at it. And I've had setbacks. It hasn't been linear, but yeah. But I don't. It's nothing I can tell you. Maybe it's my baby fine hair. I don't know.
So, Joe, we're at 1:45. I want to be mindful of your time. And I know your tummy must be rumbling. Are you okay to take one or two more?
Oh, yeah. Listen, one of the things my wife will tell you about it is talking about me, I can go for hours.
All right. Well, in the interest of kind of keeping in theme, I'm going to exert some editorial influence here and pick out some questions that are more related to science communication. So let's go to Ashley Pierce next. And if anyone's upset with me, I sincerely apologize. I will gladly read your angry emails.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for being here. I think you kind of addressed my question a little bit. It was kind of about the anti-vax movement that's taking off, and how do we, if you have tips for addressing it. And you said, listening to people and their concerns. So I guess I'm wondering if you yourself have ever changed somebody's mind about vaccines, and if so, how'd you do it?
Probably, if I did, I may not even know about it. I certainly don't know from anything I've said on the radio. Nobody's ever called me up and said I used to worry and now I don't. But it's true. I wasn't joking when I said talk to your small group. I mean, my mother, my sister, they have hesitation, but they wait and they say, "What does Joey say?" Sorry, I used to be known as Joey. And then my mother's friend Marie decides, because she knows that I know, and so that community begins to build, and that's my belief anyway, is that you don't convince people you don't know, you convince people you do know. Well, I mean, maybe you convince people you don't know, but that would be my suggestion. And I mean, I only have one. I feel like I only have one strategy, and that's tell people the truth. And I try to do it in a amusing, entertaining way. But apart from that, that's it. I don't know if it works. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, I know I'm a good communicator because I'm told that, but I don't know if it's changing anybody's mind, which is upsetting sometimes to me, because I want people to know that vaccines are what's going to save us from this pandemic. But even more than that, you're changing your behavior while the vaccine is getting rolled out is going to be essential. It's not that complicated, but I don't know what it would take to convince someone who's skeptical. I mean, it's a little bit like telling people they should quit smoking. I mean, I don't think anybody in America who smokes can have any illusion about whether or not smoking is good or bad for you. They still do it. Now I know, there's addictive nature of nicotine and all that, but people don't always make choices rationally. So, sorry.
Let's go to JF next.
This is John. I'm an STPF alum. Really enjoyed the discussion today. And I'm curious, since you're now writing for the public, how do you characterize that audience? Is there a particular grade level or level of scientific understanding that you target?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is, I think probably, my when he was in the 5th grade or 4th grade, I guess that's probably my son. I would be aiming for him. It would really be interesting to take apart my stories now and say, well, did you really aim at that level? But I don't. I just try to make it as simple as I possibly can. And what editors are for, to keep reminding you when you drop into jargon. And I mean, for example, clinical trials. If I said clinical trials to my 5th grade kid, he wouldn't know what that is. Trial. Why are they on trial? What's a clinic? And so why not just say we're going to test the vaccine on a lot of people, and we're going to do it in a way that'll tell us whether it works or not. And here's how we're going to do that. I mean, you don't have to say clinical trial. It's not essential. Now, I say it a lot because somewhere in the world of science communication or communication, we've convinced ourselves that everybody knows what a clinical trial is. And I don't even know if that's true. So I try to remember to say, okay, it's clinical trial. Here's what a clinical trial is. You do this and you do that and you compare them. And then you say, oh, do I see a difference? And if you do see a difference, you think, oh, do I see a difference because it's a real difference? Or did I just happen to pick the wrong number of people, the wrong people? Okay, so I've now just given you the entirety of clinical trial theory in 30 seconds, right? Without using words like clinical trial. I'm not trying to teach people how to do a clinical trial. I'm trying to teach people to understand what a clinical trial does. And that's a lot easier. And I'm not even trying to teach them because they're going to forget as soon as they walk away from the radio or stop listening. But that's okay. I'm not educating people. I'm trying to get them a sense of, people kept asking me, how do they know the vaccine works? I mean, how do they know whether people were going to get exposed or not? And the answer is they don't. And that's a hard one for people to grasp. But then you explain about randomization, and you pick 2 equal groups, and you figure, well, this group is just as likely as this group to get exposed to the virus. Some of them are going to, because there's a lot of virus circulating around. So if I take 2 groups that are picked at random, and the only thing that I know that's different about them is one got a vaccine and the other got a placebo, and there's a difference in how many people in these 2 groups got infected, well, something's happening. I don't know. I think any kid can understand that.
Let's go to Danielle next.
I was going to ask, you talked about tone in your articles and imitating local newspapers. Do you have any tips on what that means?
Yes, I do. We're talking about language and what language you would use. What I would do if I were trying to figure out the tone of a newspaper or a magazine is I would see how they wrote the story compared to how some other outlet wrote the same story. See what kind of metaphors they used, what kind of technical words they used, how straightforward it was, how many people who weren't scientists are in the piece, how many people who are scientists, but you learn something about them that's not scientific. And you're trying to find out the style of a journal. I mean, if you look at Wired, or you look at Vanity Fair, or you look at New Yorker, or you look at NPR, we all have our little style points about how we cover the same thing. Sometimes it's just the length, but usually it's more like, Like in my stories, I try to put in some little personal detail about the scientist, because I'm trying to show people that scientists are not these disembodied experts, but they're just people who know something about something. And so, yeah, it's just looking at the language, and also looking at the choice of article. That's very important. A lot of people pitch stories that they're interested in, but if they don't know the magazine, they can find out pretty soon or quickly whether the magazine is interested just by looking at it. You can make a guess, an educated guess, that they're not going to take a story on bowling in Science magazine. They might. Anyway, it's an interesting question, though.
Let's go to Isel.
So I'm also a AAAS fellow alum, and I'm now at NIH. And so for all of you asking questions about science policy and writing, we do a lot of that. So reach out to your networks and to alumni and do informational interviews. But Joe, my questions to you are, how do you figure out what to write? Where do you start? Like, how do you figure out that whole process and getting the information, getting your sources? I know you mentioned looking at different papers, but how do you figure out what piques your interest and other people's interest? And then the second question I had is, how would any of us get a job at NPR if you have any advice?
You could kill me, take mine.
No, never.
There can only be one, like the Highlander.
Yeah, well, you could. I wouldn't mind. It's one of my favorite jokes about this guy. Sorry, his wife says, "Do you want to be cremated or buried when you die?" And he says, "Surprise me." So I don't really mind what happens after I leave NPR. Well, to be serious, yeah, there are all kinds of internship opportunities at NPR, and there's a whole page with an application process. So jobs at npr.org or internships at npr.org or something like that is a way to find out. In terms of how to, what to cover, well, right now it's not been a problem. Cover vaccines about the COVID outbreak. Okay, what about, yes, do that one. Yes, another one. Yes, COVID vaccine. Yes. Today, for example, I was talking to a company that's making the Novavax vaccine. And the thing that I thought was just a great image was they're planning to make hundreds of millions of doses, but they start with 2 vials this size. One vial has a baculovirus in it that has been transfected or whatever, inserted with the spike protein that they want the vaccine to express. And the other are insect cells that they're going to infect with this baculovirus, and the insect cells are going to produce the proteins. But the image of going from 2 vials to a product that's going to save America is just a great image. Now, is that enough for a story? I don't know. I think so. I told my editor, he said, that sounds really cool. The answer to what you said, something which I will disabuse you of, and that is, I don't do stories that I think my audience would be interested in. I do stories that I'm interested in. They can take it or leave it. But the other part of that is I do stories that my editors are interested in. And we have a joke in the news world that says news is something that happens to your editor. And so, I had the story I did tonight, don't tell anyone, was a dopey story that my editor made me do. How did I start? I looked what it had been done before. I looked what other people had done, and I called them. It's not magic. I mean, it's just, every time I've thought that I have come up with some idea that nobody's had before, I find somebody who's already had it. So I've given up on, being the first. So you can almost always find somebody who's started the ball rolling already. And, that gives you a start. You don't have to only interview the people that the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or I think in this case it was Foreign Affairs or some journal like that. You don't have to only interview those people, but those people can get you started and point you to other people. And I mean, in my case, I'm also always, well, two things. I'm listening for people who are articulate. So that's a kind of a problem. Not every person who knows a lot is articulate. And then I'm also looking for people who aren't 100% older white men, because it's pretty easy to do all your stories with 100% older white men, because they tend to be the ones who stand up and say, "Talk to me."
I'm so heartened to hear you saying that and thinking about that. Before COVID, like how did you get in terms of those ideas for what to write? Like, would you actually look at, for example, NIH? We have a lot of social media feeds and we post things on Instagram and all those things. How do you actually look through those and pick them up? Do you look at PubMed for the feeds? Like, what's the actual reference sources for the stuff that you might get?
Well, I don't know why social media hasn't really stuck with me. I look at it sometimes. I wouldn't say that I've gotten a lot of our ideas from it. I mean, going back, I've got a list as long as your arm of stories that I want to get to. So I'm not actively seeking. And the other thing, by the way, and this is both a cop-out and the truth, there are so few science stories that must be done that you can pretty much do any one of them, because it's hard to say. I mean, what science story is so important that if I didn't cover it, I would be laughed out of the profession? And the answer is, well, okay, COVID-19. Yeah, okay, what else? I mean, it's pretty stunning that there has been almost no other coverage. So has there been no other news this year? Has nobody discovered anything else? Of course not. It's just that the bar has been raised by the public importance of COVID-19. So the answer is, it used to be I tried to figure out what's important. And once upon a time, I tried to figure out what was going to be in the New York Times so that my editor wouldn't bug me about it. And now I've decided I don't care, because I did have a conversation. I guess I haven't cared for a long time, because I was writing with a New York Times reporter to a place or something, and she was telling me about a story she was working on. I said, "That's really great. Can you let me know, when that gets published? Because I'd like to do that story too." And she says, "Oh, no, it's not ready for publication yet." And I said, "Why? Don't wait. It won't work if you wait till that happens. Tell it now when it's interesting, and it might work." And so I just have this feeling like it's just, the really, really, really important stuff, we don't even know what it is yet.
Thank you.
Nobody was interviewing, what's his name, when he came up with PCR. That turned out to be important. Jennifer Doudna is probably the first, the CRISPR was probably the one of the very, very, very few things that happened. And everybody who knew anything said, "Oh, this is going to be important." And I was already still a year late. The paper came out in 2012, and I didn't do my first story until 2014.
All right, we're coming up on an hour, so I say we squeeze in one more question, and then I think we all owe Joe a good night's rest. So,
yeah.
All right, so let's go to Win Meyer.
Thank you so much, Chris. And Joe, thank you so much for your time. Apologies that this is a bit of a selfish question, but I'm interested as an academic, what your advice is to academic scientists and trainees. What do you wish they knew about science communication and what you do? And what do you see as scientists' roles, or if they have one, in communicating their science to the public?
Well, I have, okay. First of all, for most journalists, and we're talking just about journalists now, when they call you they need to talk to you right that minute because they're going to call somebody else if they don't hear right back from you, and the story is going to move on. So there's a different time horizon. So that's the first thing. The second thing is show up. A lot of scientists can't be bothered. And the answer is too bad. I'll try and make this as painless as I can, but you got to talk to me, I think. And the third thing is humility. I think that I've been to a bunch of these webinars or workshops where you teach scientists communication skills, and it's a weekend or it's a couple hours or something. And I think, okay, now that I've explained my profession to you in 2 hours, how about explaining, molecular biology to me in 2 hours? Okay, I mean, I understand that they're not 100% comparable, but I didn't come out of fully formed as a perfect science writer because somebody gave me a 2-hour lecture about how to do it. So all I mean by humility is don't think that because you're a great scientist or you wrote a bunch of papers that people really like that you're a good communicator. They're different skills. And if you want to become a good communicator, you certainly can. It takes a little bit of practice and time. Some people are naturals. I get it. That you might be one of those. But humility, because I just it's not. I mean, I don't want to say that what I do is impossibly difficult. It's not, but it's something that you have to do for a while to figure out what works, I think. I did want to answer, there was an interesting question that rolled by about vaccine hesitancy that I just wanted to opine about. Somebody said whether people are making it to the waiting list of the vaccines here in Washington, I assume because healthcare professionals are refusing it. And the answer is I haven't heard that, but I'm not 100% surprised because I have heard that there's hesitancy, not so much in healthcare professionals, although them too, but this was in long-term care facilities. And again, there are reasons for that escape me, but I don't know. I don't know if it's being studied. And again, I am in not a position to find out unless somebody else is looking at it. So if you know the answer to that, call me up. And that's my final message to all of you guys. Please, 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 if you think that I can be helpful in some way or that you can help me in some way, drop me a note. I love to hear from people, and yeah, I might forget and not respond right away, and you might be mad, but you could always ping me again or guilt trip me, or don't dox me. But no, I'm happy to help if I possibly can. It's yeah.
All right. Well, with that, Joe, thank you so much for being here and talking to us and answering our questions. Everybody else, let's give Joe a big digital hand.
It was fun. I love the Hollywood squares. I mean, I prefer to sit and be talking to you in a room with some beers and something, but I like this a lot better than talking to a blank screen. Anyway, thank you all very much. I had a good time, and it was lovely to meet you all.